Hey everybody, Tom Barnas here. Stories from the 78. Do you remember growing up back in the day? Well, I mean, it depends on who's watching this, but if I am talking about my generation, like born in 1980, you grew up with like Springer, you grew up with Maury, and even Donahue early, Oprah, and then you got into like the real world and Newlyweds on MTV and The Grind and TRL, and you kind of just lived your life on MTV because that was like social media back in the day. MTV was that and the radio were like as close as you can identify to social media now. That's what it was like back in the day. You listen to your favorite radio station tell you about your favorite musicians and movies, and you had MTV as that bridge that I would argue is what MTV with social media is today, except without the weird politics, right? It was just more about pop culture and following people that you loved and admired. And then you watch these things and you realize, is this stuff for real? Like, are these things for real? I don't know, because the shows that you're watching seem a little off or a little weird or can't be, but nonetheless, it was an amazing time. The early aughts, as we're calling the years of like 2000 to 2010, a lot of things happened and changed, and the advent of like HD television, high speed internet, better cell phones. You have the advent of the iPhone and everything in between, and the death of the razor, right? So my friend Julia Fine wrote this fantastic book called The Honeymoon Stage. It kind of plays with all those elements. She's a local author from Chicago area, at least for the last several years, and I welcome her now to the program. Julia, how are you?
Good, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. This is we're talking about your new book that you have coming out here, and it goes back to the aughts. Explain what that is and the vibe of
It
the book, if
does.
you will.
It does. The aughts, it's interesting because it's like the 2000s, but the distinction between the early 2000s and the late 2000s feels so drastic, sort of the difference from Y2K
Yeah.
to like 2010.
Right. Yeah.
A lot happened. And so this is sort of it takes place between 2002 and 2007, but like the majority of it is like 2002, 2003. So it feels very like Y2K as opposed to like Obama's America 2008. I don't know, just the very different vibes. So,
And did I read this right? You wrote Gothic fiction before,
yeah. Mhm.
and
Yeah.
then so what made you want to go from like Gothic fiction to something that kind of satires the early 2000s, especially the reality TV world?
Yeah, I so when I started writing this book in my mind, it was very much going to also be gothic fiction, just set in 2000s Los Angeles.
Hmm.
And the more that I wrote it, the more it sort of felt like maybe it wanted to be something a little bit lighter and um, not quite as dark.
Sure.
And the stuff, my earlier stuff, there's sort of speculative elements to it, and this one just made more sense to be just a straightforward, realistic depiction of the time period.
Hmm.
And we ended up, it's coming out under a pen name. My previous work is under my actual name, Julia Fine, and this one's as Margaux Eliot, which is actually my kids' names spelled differently.
Ah.
And yeah, a lot of it is because it is just like lighter, different kind of audience, different vibe. But to
Hmm.
me, there's a lot of similar themes, and they're really talking about the same sorts of issues, just like in different ways.
Right on. And you used the power that in the intro, I mentioned like growing up of a certain age. And now I'm 45. I guess I'm a little older than you. But I grew up with like Springer, and then I grew up with like The Grind on MTV, into the real world, into every reality show possible, and also grew up with the Mickey Mouse Club. So I like that era. When you really think about it, that's why it's called the aughts, I would imagine, just because there was so much that happened. Like reality TV kind of exploded. Like MTV started, but it was like a slow burn of like the real world, because everybody was like, that's garbage TV. And all of a sudden it just turned into like Jersey Shore and everything else. I mean, I imagine that was a lot of fun to go back to that era with like, Timberlake and, Britney Spears, like all up in your
Hmm.
head about that.
Oh, so much fun. And really interesting. I mean, everybody thinks about like how the like the last group of the Mickey Mouse Club, I think it was like Carrie Russell and
Yeah.
Ryan Gosling and all these, it's like, whoa, they all like really exploded and had these huge careers. But I thought it was interesting too. It's like, well, not all of them did. Like, what happened to the ones who like were really successful as kids and then it didn't work out so well? So there's a character in the book who sort of like hits it big really early on and then like nothing quite hits the way the version of the Mickey Mouse Club, which I call the Tiger Crew in the book, but it's a pretty obvious homage. Nothing quite hits that way.
The Tiger
But
Crew, I like
yeah,
it.
I also was really interested. The thing I have always been fascinated by, like the super early celeb reality TV shows, so like the
Mhm.
Osbournes and like Newlyweds, Nick and
Yeah.
Jessica, and the way that it was sort of it's like marketing these musicians and these celebrities, but they hadn't quite figured out yet like how to put on that facade that you now get for the celeb reality shows, like all the Kardashian shows and things like that. Like they know they're so even when it's something where it's like, oops, I showed you this thing, it's all so staged and so scripted. But when you watch like the Osbournes and Newlyweds and some of those, you're like, oh, this feels like it's the real person. So I was so curious about like how much of that is we thought that it was authentic, but it wasn't really, and how much of it did they sort of were they learning on the go about what it meant to sort of be a celebrity presenting yourself to an audience. And now there's social media, which sort of gives
I know.
celebrities a whole different vein. But it's so fascinating because it's almost like they were the guinea pigs for like, the Osbournes and Jessica Simpson and Nick Lachey were like the guinea pigs for like social media in a way, or for like
It really was
yeah.
social media, like because that's what people lived through. Like that was the pop culture that everybody talked about, was watching what they were doing on that. And that's kind of like your book is called The Honeymoon Stage, and
Mhm.
it kind of uses the newlyweds as like
Yes.
the
Uh-huh.
premise of the story, right? Like it's about a child star that's getting married,
Mhm.
or a reality star that's getting married, and that's a show itself, and seeing how producers kind of manipulate the truth.
Yes, absolutely. How they pull the strings, even when it's, we all know that they do it for the shows with like the everyday people, but the fact that producers are pulling the strings on the celebrities too, is fascinating to me.
Yeah, I imagine it just going through this. You could have probably gone a bunch of different ways with how much how much they bent the truth, right?
Hmm.
In terms of like generating the kind of story that you want. Did you have a lot of fun like navigating those strings? And did you was there something specific from years past from a show that you watch, you're like, "Oh, that was like there had to be somebody manipulating that," or I'm going to use that and kind of weave it into this story?
I mean, I feel like so. I watched The Bachelor back in
Oh yeah.
its heyday.
Still on
I
now.
know
That's
it's
the
still
crazy
on, but I
thing.
have not. It's been like 10 years, I
Lord.
think. As soon as I had kids, it was like I can't dedicate like 7 hours of television a week to this. Like it just is not can't do it. But I
No.
did watch it like for quite a while. And I was always very aware of like, ooh, this girl is totally drunk, and somebody just asked her a leading question, and now she's gonna say whatever this is. So I was
Yeah.
really interested in like how that operates. You know, just behind the scenes of any reality show. And I talked to several people who had worked on reality shows and, heard stories about things like, oh, like they'll like, spray paint the trees to make them look more romantic, or, all of the stuff that supposedly is like the date that someone sets up. And this is true, I think, on, like Newlyweds as well. Like, oh, this romantic gesture that this person just did, like that's a producer who did it and then brought them in. And so that element of it, I found really, really interesting. And then I also, in preparation for this, I went back and I rewatched all of Newlyweds,
So
which,
was that as good, or was it worse,
it's
or where was it?
interesting. It is, you can find the whole thing on YouTube. I'm probably calling out whoever like pirated it and put it on there right now. But it's there for anyone who wants to see it. I was shocked because like my memory of it, part of it was that there were certain elements of it where I was like, I remember watching this like in my basement in my parents' house,
Mhm.
like I just remembered very clearly having seen this before. But there are other things too. Is like it is sort of unbelievable what passed as like okay behavior on television. Like particularly with poor Jessica Simpson, who just got pummeled by the media on all sides.
Mhm.
Right immediately after this, there was like the whole Tony Romo. Like, it was her
Oh,
fault. She was like the before
right.
Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, it was like Jessica Simpson ruining things for Tony Romo and everyone being like, you're the
Yeah,
reason the
it's her
Cowboys are
fault they didn't
bad.
win a
Yeah.
Super Bowl. Yeah,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
that's right. I remember that now.
And it's like it starts with the show too. Like they're so it's like, oh, here she is. She just got off from doing like 5 concerts and they're like, Jessica, why didn't you fold your laundry? Or, like they call her a brat all the time. I don't know. It's just so it seems so inappropriate. And I also feel sort of like, wow, this is like supposedly the theme of the show is like this perfect marriage and like they are bickering and it's not I don't know, it does not look like a marriage that I want to be in. And it was
Mm.
really interesting because when I watched it live, like I don't think I followed it, episode by episode, saw it all, but like it was they replayed that show all the time. That was constantly sort of in reruns. And I didn't my takeaway was just like, oh, how stupid is she? And then you watch it again and you're sort of like, oh, she's like 20. And like exhausted. And this, is not a model of something that I want to be emulating. So it was interesting as like sort of more of an adult who like can understand what was happening to go back to that and sort of feel like, oh, that, we as a culture did her wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we did that a lot back then. The inequality
Mm-hmm.
of male pop
Oh
stars
yeah.
or TV stars versus female. I mean that kind of happened in Jersey Shore,
Mm-hmm.
where good or bad, like people knew Snooki, right? And
Yes.
like
Mm-hmm.
how they portrayed her.
And the funny thing too, I feel like actually she's a really good comparison to Jessica Simpson because everybody knew Snooki and was like, "Oh, Snooki, she's so dumb." When like in reality, it's like, no, she's like putting on a character. Like she's doing
Yeah.
this and building this for herself. Like she's not, like there are certainly elements probably where one of the dumb things she says, like is something that she actually would say outside of it. But it's like, no, she's actually very clever in like making a name for herself by doing this
Mhm.
and nobody really like gave her the credit at the time.
No, all that stuff was like new, and I just remember right when you thought you saw it all, then there was like something else where you're like, "Are you kidding me?" And
Mhm.
I don't even know if, I mean, I don't know if that could even happen anymore the way it did because social media is a thing and they've done a lot of the things that,
Yeah.
like borderline. I mean, they went up to the line of like, okay, we can't put that on TV, but we can put this on TV. Like I feel like
Mhm.
that's kind of where reality TV has gone, especially with like, the Kardashians and what has transpired with that family and Kanye in there and all the
Oh my
things.
gosh,
Like
yes.
it's insane. So I imagine, when you were growing up, I mean, so Newlyweds was like your jam? Was
No,
that the
I
one?
didn't really. I think I saw like a few episodes. I think everybody knew about the Chicken of the Sea. Like it just
Oh
was
gosh.
so like everybody knew. Like you could not escape that. I feel like probably like my grandmother, somehow would have heard about that just because it was everywhere. Reality TV when I was growing up. What did I watch? I was not really a big reality TV watcher until I was a little bit older. Although I did watch like Cribs and that sort of thing.
Cribs. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
I
a good
watched
one.
Cribs. I'm trying to remember if Teen Mom was like before or after. I was actually much more into the like these are real people, Well, they were real people, but obviously, this impression of like we're gonna take, this is the camera on the wall filming these people who they're gonna behave as if they're not even being filmed. Like this idea that we're watching something authentic when like it was never actually. Um, but yeah, since then. I certainly the Housewives I feel like started later too. That wasn't really a childhood thing, but I was very into the Housewives for a while early on. Um,
Where did you grow up?
I grew up outside of Washington D.C.
Oh, okay.
So in Chevy Chase, Maryland, and then moved to the Midwest for college and just never left. So
Ah, I always wanted to go to Chevy Chase, Maryland, only because
the
of the actor Chevy
name,
Chase.
I know
And
that's how
like, was he
everybody
named after it or something? Do you
he
even know?
must have been. I think it's a stage name. Like I think he took that name. I
Oh,
wonder if
that
he
makes
was
more
like
sense.
driving through and was like, "This would be a nice name to call myself." But it was like some battle in the UK. I want to say is what it's named. Like some play. It's some British or maybe not British, but some you.
Something
I
not
don't know,
here.
something not here. Yeah, that
Yeah.
where it came from. But yeah, growing up, that's just what it was. And then as soon as I like left for college, everyone's like, "That's not real." So.
So you came to the Chicago area for college,
I
and
so
then.
I went to Iowa for college,
Hmm.
and then my then boyfriend, now husband, grew up in the west suburbs and moved here. And I thought like, oh, I'll stay in Chicago, like I'll be there a year and then I'll move back east. And I am still here. And I don't think I'm ever gonna leave. So we
No,
have a
once we
house, we've
get
got
you,
2 kids. Yeah. No,
yeah.
it actually just the other day, what was I complaining? There was something where I'd seen my husband was like, "You've made it, you've graduated, you're a real Chicagoan." I was complaining that someone in New York was like, "Oh, Chicago, you can learn from New York." And I was like, "New York can learn from Chicago." And he's like, "Oh,
Ugh,
congratulations, you've made it. You were one of
yeah.
us." Like
It's funny. I did an interview not that last week, and it was about this new production facility, let's just call it a music production facility, and it was originally a Chicago place, and it was bought by a firm or organization from New York, and I was like, oh no. And I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna do the interview because it's a cool story, and the
Mhm.
buildings are in Chicago, so it's still good for Chicago. But I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I wonder how long it will take this person to mention that they're from New York. And
Was it right
I
up right away or
shit you not, I would say within a minute they said New York twice. And so much so that within 5 minutes, I was like, he said something because he was saying, "Oh, this is so good. It's like New York." And he's like, "Oh, he's like, I mean Chicago," like because he was talking about the Chicago building. And I in the interview, I'm like, "Ah." And
caught
I
you
said,
out?
you know, you can always tell somebody's from New York by how many times they like to mention they're from New
That they're
York.
from New York. That's true. That is
Oh,
very true. I
so
know.
yeah, you were
My brother lived in Chicago and now lives in New York, and I'm
traitor.
constantly, I know. He's in Brooklyn. Like, why don't you just move to Logan Square? Like,
Yeah, same
you got
thing.
everything you need.
Yeah,
So,
cheaper. You still got the train, you know,
Mhm,
you got the view
mhm.
if
All
you've
the
got a nice roof.
restaurants, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
and not crazy expensive.
I love it here. My kids are very much Chicago kids at this point. We're not going anywhere. So,
So, with this difference in writing style from like the goth stuff that you've done, do you think this is something you'll do a little bit more of, or is this like just get your feet wet and then we go back to what you know, or what are you
yeah,
thinking?
I what's funny is I feel like every book that I have written, it's been very much like what am I interested in reading and sort of diving into. And so for this it was like, oh, it would be really fun to dive back into reality TV shows from the early 2000s. And with one of my books is it's called The Upstairs House, and that's the one that is set in Chicago, is about a woman who thinks she's being haunted by the ghost of Margaret Wise Brown, who's the author of Goodnight Moon, like thinks that she's living in the condo with them. And so that one I was like reading Goodnight Moon to my kid every night, trying to get him to go to sleep. And I was sort of like, I would be interested in learning more about this. So I think it really is going to depend on like what my next obsession ends up being. And whether or not it feels like it's more like a spooky, speculative type thing or something that's a little more like bright, shiny bubblegum. And yeah, we'll see what happens.
Both are fun though, as far as like exercising that muscle of your imagination, your mind, to put
Absolutely.
some
Yeah.
pen to paper, like they
Hmm.
say. Um, did you were you always a person that was a writer, like going all the way back to college, or is this something? Only reason why I asked is I've met so many writers who didn't necessarily go to school to be a writer. It's something they found later in life, and then wrote these incredible books. So I was just curious.
Yeah, I did not go to college for writing. I graduated and had like a sales job and then a PR job, and I wasn't loving it. And I sort of thought like, if I could do anything in the world, what would I do? Um, And I thought, like, oh, it would be really fun to write books. And so I simultaneously applied to law schools and art school and decided to go to art school, which
Ah,
everyone was like, this is the dumbest decision ever. Why would you ever do this? Like, you'll never be able to. But I pieced it together. I like nannied and, did various odd jobs until I got to a point where I could like teach and I do freelance editing and I teach and I write and like it sort of cobbles together a career. But yeah, it was definitely a sort of, were I to go back and tell my like 26-year-old self, like, is this something you should do? Like, absolutely not. Like, my parents were, all the adults in my life are right. Like, this is a really stupid gamble to make. And I got lucky that it paid off, but
hmm.
it was certainly a gamble.
Yeah, but you know what? I've met again so many authors who say that thing, but man, oh man, you imagine if you were a litigator right about now. I
Oh
mean,
my gosh,
yes,
it
you
would
might
be
have a
worse.
bigger,
I
yeah,
know.
you might have a
It
bigger
was
house, but you might be absolutely miserable.
Oh, I would be miserable, and I might not even have been able to get a job there anyway. So it's like, I think that was
True.
my logic. Was like, well, there's too many lawyers as is, so like, what am I gonna do? Like, I might
Yeah,
as
does the
well.
world really need another
I
lawyer? right?
Truly. I might as well do something that I like doing and make money a different way. So
Absolutely.
that's what I did for a while.
So people should go out, buy the book. It comes out on the 4th of November, correct? A Honeymoon
It
Stage,
does,
the 4th
yeah.
of November. Do you have any? I know that you are local to Chicago. Do you have any book signings coming up in the Chicago area or
Yeah,
anywhere around?
I'm going to be on November 6th. I'm going to be at Volumes in Wicker Park. It's at like Milwaukee and Wood. And we are throwing a like sort of Y2K themed book launch party with all that you would imagine costumes and stickers and music and all the Y2K themed things. So I will
Oh,
be there for
fantastic.
that.
Do you remember the night of Y2K when it was in a turn
Yes, I do.
from 99 to 2000?
I was in my friend's basement and I remember somebody had a shirt. It was like a little white t-shirt that had rhinestones that said 1999 and then the next day put one on that said 2000 and it was like obviously for, like everybody the most boring sort of basic New Year's Eve. But I just remember the shirt when she woke up the next day changing it and I remember just like basement party thinking I was very cool probably. But where
I
were
was
you?
I was at a John Mellencamp concert
Oh,
in
nice.
Indianapolis, and it was a if we're gonna go out listening to
Singing
music kind of a vibe.
perfect.
So I mean, I think it was like Jack and Diane at the Stroke of Midnight, and we were like, "We're still here, great!" Yeah,
Life goes on.
in the middle of it was Indianapolis is where it was at the time it was called the Conseco Field House where the Pacers play now. But yeah, I'll never forget that, and it was with an ex-girlfriend that is no, she's not in my life anymore. But I'll never forget that. It was a good time. So either way, Y2K has apparently there's a big palette of stories and memories that you can tell from the Y2K era or the aughts, the early aughts as we've
Mhm.
called them so far. So Julia, congrats on the new book out here on the 4th of November. Your book signing. Did you say that was on the 6th or was that
That's
on
on
the
the
4th?
6th, yeah,
Yeah.
Thursday
Okay.
the 6th.
Awesome. And then I'm guessing they can buy them online anywhere else they buy
Absolutely. Yep,
books.
all over the place.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia, so much for taking time to chat with me. I appreciate it very much. And you know what? Congratulations on all
Thank
of
you
the
so
success of
much.
this book and all your other books.
Thank you.